In case you weren't aware of this, pay attention. Honda, they really want this Franz Hermann guy. If you know, you know. Yes, there is even further noise coming from Honda that they are not willing to sit back and allow the current status quo over at Aston Martin regarding lineups to continue as is. Yep, this is a far cry from where they were back in the middle of 2023, where they first signed their deal with Aston Martin and vowed that they would never have any influence on the driver lineup whatsoever, because many people were looking over to Fernando Alonso in the corner and go like, what's he going to say on the radio next? Whoa, is he going to say GP2 engine again? Please say GP2 engine again and go out. But no, we're not getting that. We're getting Honda being quite spicy. Yes, they're not in the adamant phase yet. They're not demanding this from Papa Stroll. They're not stupid. But they're certainly in the assertive phase. Honda has grown a bit of spine, hasn't it, since 2021? Is this the Red Bull Max Verstappen effect? Yeah, I do think it's the Max factor, actually. I think Max has given Honda some balls. Which could easily explain why Yuki referred to Max as Big Daddy recently. Yeah, Yuki's just paraphrasing what Honda is thinking at the moment. They are signalling, lobbying, and publicly courting Verstappen whenever they can because it makes sporting and marketing sense. But they have stopped short of issuing ultimatums, and every on-record quote accepts that Aston Martin, they do own the final call. So therefore, it is up to Aston Martin to show that they can produce a solid car and a great result with the lineup that they already have. And if they can do that, then Honda will most likely accept it. That, hey, Lance Stroll, his revenge arc was going to just take a very, very long time. Countries have risen and fallen since Lance Stroll arrived in Formula 1 and vowed to be great when he had his podium in Baku in 2017. And it would also cement that Honda would be with them for the long haul through thick and thin, with or without Max. However, all of this from the likes of Koji Watanabe is an indication that the power unit supplier is not going to sit back in case there is an opportunity, a real one, to go after Max. So yes, here's Watanabe-san, the CEO of Honda Racing. This is what his stance is. Ahem. First of all, we will do everything we can to help him win his 5th world title this year, and then we will focus on our partnership with Aston Martin. But I honestly have to say that I hope there will be another opportunity for Honda to work with Max Verstappen. I hope it happens. I have talked to Max many times and he has always been positive about our attitude and mentality. Verstappen is also very good at communicating with Honda engineers. He speaks to them clearly, and that has ensured that the engineers have become their fans and that they are very committed. People often see the athlete, but I also have a deep respect for Max as a person. All these headlines came at a notable time, didn't they? And the fact that Honda and Max, they work together, their engineers understand one another. Hey, Red Bull engineers, Honda gets it! Yes, Red Bull aren't falling rapidly off the pace, yet Max's sight on his 5th consecutive world title, it's getting smaller and smaller by the race, and George Russell behind him is getting bigger and bigger. The team will probably pay close attention to this as well, especially since Honda is still their power unit supplier. Now, make no mistake, Honda is not shifting commitments away from Red Bull just yet. They still supply them, and therefore they will do whatever they can to provide Max Verstappen the best opportunity to match what Michael Schumacher did through 2000 and 2004 and get 5 world titles in a row. They'll do all they can, but ultimately it's up to the RB21 to not overcook its brakes and tyres. Oh, in terms of the power unit this year, oh no, don't worry, Honda's got this. And they will remain loyal to Red Bull, but next year, everything changes. What Watanabe-san has said is that it will shift every single focus over to Aston Martin and do what they can there. But then at the same time, they will be probably, speaking up a little bit, saying, hey, Max would be really good here, and I think he would actually listen to us, and it would really benefit us as our entire operation. So, you should really consider him, actually. Whether it's for Fernando or Lance, it remains to be seen. But I don't think Honda will sit back quietly anymore. Those days are gone. They will be sort of reverting back to what they used to do in the Satoru Nakajima days and the Yuji Ide days. But hopefully, it's with a Dutchman instead of a Japanese driver. And I don't really see this happening for next year. I think Max Verstappen will either take just a year off or he will just give Red Bull one more year to see how they handle these new regulations. If not, 2027 seems the most likely bet. Because this latest declaration is a huge tell that Honda is nowhere near as passive as they were just a few years ago. They're thumping their chest, they're demanding a continuation with the sport's current generational superstar, and a man who is deeply committed to them. So yes, Honda are just feeling quite confident that they have what it takes to be able to be the final nail in the coffin, as it were, alongside Adrian Newey, to be able to get Max Verstappen to come along and join them, because, well, Honda and Max just get on like that. Adrian and Max get on like that. There are so many signs that Max and Aston Martin could be really compatible. And now the power unit supplier is just going, hey, you should really try and get this guy because we really like working with him and we want to like working with you. So hint, hint, we'll be getting on famously, you know, Max Factor. But one thing is for sure, the way that Honda is doing it right now, it is very careful. It's extremely cautious. It's very tippy-toe because, like I touched upon earlier, this is very early days with this relationship with Aston Martin, that they don't want to tread on the toes of Papa Stroll because he can react very, very quickly. We're all seeing what's going on with Adrian Newey, him not touching this year's car, most likely at the recommendation of Fernando himself. And I'm hearing headlines of Papa Stroll frustrated saying, I pay this Adrian guy $33 million a year and he ain't doing jack on our car this year. In this case, Honda will voice their opinions, not dictate. And yeah, it's pressure, but it's not a red line ultimatum. And if Aston Martin can show they are title contenders on their own, Honda's wish list will sound pretty reasonable, rather than confrontational. But yeah, I think one big factor here is whether or not they actually nail the power unit regulations. If they can, then their bargaining power will be immense. If it's not, and it's a damp squib, they won't have a leg to stand on. Now, okay, onto the circuit itself, the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. And I am not going to try and say it out loud for a second year in a row, because we all know what it is, and we all know that it's an absolute mouthful. But there is one big point of discussion this weekend. It is the return of the king that we last saw in 2018. The likes of the Hypersoft. The pink, powerful delight, otherwise now known more blandly as the C6. But make no mistake, this is the Hypersoft in all but name. This tyre could easily make or break a team, because we have not seen any of them run this tyre, even though I believe it was readily available for the Bahrain pre-season testing session. Nobody touched it. So yeah, it's going to be absolutely mad. It means that for qualifying, the teams have to nail it on the first go, or else that tyre, it's good for no one, unless you make it into a coffee table to sell for millions of dollars or something. The temperature for the weekend is expected to be not baking, but not cool either, low 20s. It's very much on the edge of a potential overheating, but potential rain on Sunday as well, albeit at low risk, could make things spicy. But the other big spicy news here, aside from the C6 tyres, is the return of one Franco Colapinto. And if he does score a point this weekend, which may be likely since he's done very well in sprint weekends for F3 and F2, then my Franco Colapinto bet that I did last year, when he would be getting a point, I would chuck a pint of colour on camera, that remains intact. I will still be doing that. Franco is guaranteed 5 appearances in the second Alpine seat this year, replacing Jack for at least a little while. It'll all depend on what happens come the British Grand Prix. It could either be Jack back in the car for a few more races before they make their final decision, or maybe their reserve driver Paul Aaron getting a few races to have a go before maybe a final decision is made in time for Baku, when F1 leaves Europe. Regardless, I don't think you need me to tell you that this entire situation regarding Alpine has become extremely messy. Oliver Oakes had just quit at a peak, frustrated that he was the puppet. We all thought that, but then suddenly it turned out it was completely not that at all. That potentially, Oliver was running scared from the Rozzers back in the UK when his brother got caught by Northamptonshire police, and now he's hiding off in Dubai, Oliver. And now nobody's quite sure what the heck is going on. That maybe the Mazepins have still got something to do with this. The reason why I haven't made a dedicated video about it is that, much like with the initial rumblings regarding Christian Horner, it's in the hands of the Rozzers at the moment, and I don't want to be one of those conspiratorial nuts and come up with some half-baked situations with an ongoing investigation, so that's why I've not made one. It's just a completely weird situation where Flavio may actually be the innocent party here, or at least he wasn't fully aware of the details here, and now he's very much trying to convince the Renault group that he's still the guy, that he didn't just pick a dud or an absolute clanger of a situation, that he did do his due diligence, and I'm pretty sure that Renault are going to have investigations of their own to make sure that they've got nothing in cahoots with high tech. So instead, I would rather focus on Colapinto's potential. What can he actually try and do here? Because this has been very much speculated, because no one's quite sure what he can do with this car, because I've heard so many rumours about Franco not being as fast as Paul Aaron in tests, but there haven't been any official printed out results and what have you, and there most likely won't be because, well, they were private tests and we're only hearing this from hearsay. So until we actually get to FP1 and we actually get to see what Franco can do with the A525, and after all of this TPC extensive testing programs with Alpines, we won't know the full story, so we can actually compare him to Gasly in the same car. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just happy that Franco's getting a second chance, really. And this car may suit him well. It doesn't seem to be as crash-prone as the Williams FW46 of last year, where a gust of wind can suddenly send it spinning off and then $1 million down the drain. But at the same time, this Alpine car is just so all over the place. I can't really place it. Is it the 6th fastest car like people thought in Bahrain preseason testing? Or is it right down there with Sauber and Aston Martin? No one's quite sure. Was Bahrain this year with Pierre a fluke? Or was it just untapped potential and just bad luck in qualifying, since that is a watchword? Qualifying is very important this year. But say what you will with the main team, the test team is a pretty strong operation with their extensive facilities and Alpine Academy resources. And I reckon that we will see a calmer Franco. One that is far more assured now that he has the backing of a team principal who truly wants him, and has room for him in the here and now. Instead of Williams where they did want him, but there was no room for a couple of years, if that. Like I said, the Alpine car isn't as sensitive, and Franco does have a good handle on it. We've not heard him crash the car in testing and what have you. So there is a level of stability here, and that could easily help him compound on all of this, and he's had plenty of time dedicated to him. He knows the simulator, he knows how the car operates, on a computer at the very least. There's a lot going for him. But at the same time, the expectations are a fair bit different as to they were last year. Like with Liam Lawson subbing in for Daniel Ricciardo, there was a slight expectation of maybe he might get a seat next year, but for the most part, he was subbing in for an Australian legend that unfortunately was injured at Zandvoort. He came in, he pleasantly surprised everyone, but then he came back in the second season, expectations were higher, and the mindset was completely different, and it rubbed people up the wrong way. So I imagine that in this situation, there will be far less goodwill with Franco, because the expectations and the parameters of the second stint with Alpine, they are very much different. But Williams last year, it was 9 races for, yeah, Franco, you're probably not going to get the seat next year. In fact, you won't. So just get out there and have some fun. There was not any pressure, at least for the first few races. And then people realised how good he was, he scored points, and then all the pressure in the world was on his shoulders, which he admitted caused his crash in Vegas, and then absolutely nixed up an opportunity for him to give it a go with Christian. But seriously, last year proved that there was something in this guy. This year, though, there has to be something more obvious to silence the perceptions that his recently acquired sponsors bought him the seat, not his talent. Which is wholly unfair, by the way, and I really need to stress this. If you are from Argentina, I want Franco to do well and showcase his talent, and that alone. That all of these sponsors, they're Johnny-come-latelys, that they weren't there for the beginning of Franco's journey in single-seaters, that a lot of Colapinto's efforts had to be done on his own back. And as I touched upon last year, he won the sprint race in Imola and finished 5th in the feature race, which indicates some sense of speed and understanding of this historic circuit. However, that's not a guarantee for major success around here, since this Alpine's car is a little hard to read. So quite honestly, I think the best thing he can do right now is to try and at least match Jack Doohan in terms of getting 13th and 14th, get into Q2 or something. If he can somehow score a P10 and get a singular point for Alpine, I think that would do him the world of good, and I think that would be all the evidence that Flavio News say, well, you can see I replaced Jack with a Franco and he's already scored a point, so now we've got to have him in the car a little bit more often, we have to extend the unit. Yeah, there'll be justifications to keep Colapinto around because he did score a point, which right now Alpine needs a lot of right at the moment, because slowly but surely Lance Stroll is pushing them away from Alpine. I don't know how he does it, but Lance is still bringing home the bacon for this green team, and Fernando's not even getting a look in, and that's absolutely wild to still be saying that 6 weekends in. Now, in terms of other points paying positions, it looks likely that Kimi Antonelli will probably score more points here at technically his home race, since he doesn't live too far away from the Imola region. But I definitely think that this weekend is going to be giving the Tifosi a really big headache. What do they do if Kimi is giving the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton a bit of a problem, a bit of a headache? Do they cheer him anyway? I mean, but then again, if he gets on the podium, then what did they do? It's an Italian on the podium, and that's not happened for a very long time. Let me know in the comments, if you're a member of the Tifosi and Kimi Antonelli gets on the podium and the Ferraris don't get a look in, how are you going to react? It is a very interesting scenario, and I do seriously think he will be scoring more points, which will mean his tally is coming up to 50 already. His rookie season's looking even more impressive than Oscar Piastri's, although you could easily argue the McLaren car for the first few races of 2023 was a boat, whereas Mercedes, it's a jet boat. There's also Alex Albon's error-efficient Williams to consider. He could get a nice solid Q3 cameo, which may guarantee him more points. And as for Tsunoda, could he do anything? Well, maybe. After all, this is kind of his home race too. Because even though Milton Keynes is becoming more and more relevant to the V-Carb cause, Yuki has actually gone on record to say that he's not planning to move back to the UK anytime soon, and instead will be committing himself to the region around Faenza, because that was one of the reasons why he moved out there, to better focus, because he wasn't having a good time of it while he was in the UK. And what may help him score him some points, because unlike in Miami, he will have access to some upgrades, and there will be more for Max as well at Imola, which may mean that both Red Bulls can score some points. And it is small potatoes for Yuki, but again, I keep telling you, they are small potatoes, but at least there are potatoes to consume. And what you're about to consume right now are my top 5 selections for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, so here they are. Now, you might be wondering, oh, let me guess, he's just going to predict the same top 5 again. Well, I'm sorry, but I've got good reason to think this way, and I do think that Oscar Piastri is poised to be getting his 4th Grand Prix victory in a row. And that's a really rare feat for McLaren drivers. They don't often have long win runs. I think the biggest streak they've got is 4, and that was with the likes of Prost and Senna. So Oscar Piastri on 3 already? He's already in quite esteemed territory, and if he can do it here, they'll be matching those two greats. That's nuts. He's arriving at Imola on a high. He's got 131 points to his name. He's 16 points ahead of Lando. He's got the momentum behind him. People are really converting to become Oscar stans, whereas, as you know, my boy, I've been with him the entire time. And I feel like Imola is unfinished business, much like how Miami, as he described, was one of the blots of his 2024 campaign. Imola, same thing. Had he not gotten that 3-place grid drop in qualifying, having impeded Magnussen because his pit crew didn't tell him that Magnussen was steaming up behind him, then he would have been on pole. He would have had his first pole position in Formula 1 much earlier than he did, which was actually in China of this year. And he might have even gone on to win his first Grand Prix. There is no reason for me to say that he would balls this up, unless he doesn't get a good read on the C6 tyre, which again is very rare territory for pretty much anyone on the grid. Not only that, but the Miami Grand Prix, the one he was able to win after a very shaky P13 last year, he was actually able to learn many things, and people got to really experience what his racecraft has become now. That he feels like he knows how to race Max at the moment, and that switchback, oh my goodness, that's chef's kiss. Couple that, if you had a 3-way ding-dong between Max, Charles and Oscar, it would be poetry. The Swan Lake of Formula 1. And if we do get a situation where it's Max and Oscar on the front row, oh my goodness, it's going to be wonderful. And what's also really wonderful is that my year-old almost video about how I think Oscar and Max, yeah, they could be really good rivals, it's aging like fine wine. The best take I've had in a long time. The upgrade that they did bring McLaren a flaw, one for Miami after they tested it in Jeddah, it's still staying on here, and it's actually proven its worth considerably. And I feel like both drivers will really excel around here, especially in qualifying is more important than ever, since Imola is looking likely to be dropped from the calendar, and to be fair, I love it. It's a historic track, but it's no good for these big cars. But like I said, the wild card here will be the Pirelli C6. It really depends on what these drivers can get a read on them, whether they can light them up, sustain them for maybe 2 laps and probably nothing more. If they can't, and they bait them halfway through the lap, then they could easily find themselves out of Q3. I've seen that McLaren isn't always the best in terms of firing up the tyres for 1-lap qualifying. It's still good, but it could easily be much better, which has allowed the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull Verstappen to get a look in. But then, as we see on longer runs, they can nurse those tyres. So if McLaren are feeling a little bit frisky and decide to start the race on the C6 tyres and then pit in, try to make good on that extra rubber and the compound, the grippier one, then who's to say maybe Piastri can get a good run on it and just get rid of them, they don't have to use them again. It's all hypotheticals at the moment, since we've really not seen this tyre in anger before, and it's going to be used in the Monte Carlo Grand Prix as well. So it's all unknowns here, but I do know that Oscar is looking likely to get another win here. And that Lando Norris will be second place. How far behind Oscar? I am not sure. Because one thing we did see in Miami, even though he has admitted that he has made a fair few mistakes throughout his campaign so far, his tyre management, especially in changeable conditions, is very, very good, still better than Piastri's. His 1-lap qualifying is still good, so if he can nail the C6 tyres, he might be able to get the jump on his Australian teammate. It is very, very close. But in terms of racecraft, if it does remain dry, Oscar might have him here. And it depends whether or not Max gets a look in with Lando. If they bicker, we could see another repeat of what we saw in Miami, and Oscar just gallivants off 8-9 seconds down the road, whereas Max and Lando, they're fighting each other. Oh, seriously, the way these two drivers handle Verstappen is so different that you get Oscar going like, what's your problem, mate? And then Lando's just like, oh, well, you know, Max has one way. You either have him overtake you or you crash. Or it's just like, it's very binary with Norris, but it really depends whether or not he can overcome Max in qualifying, and then it won't even matter. He will be focused on Piastri or trying to bring home the baker for McLaren and the constructors early on before the flexi-wing technical directive kicks in, and maybe McLaren might have a harder time of it. But then you've got to consider what we saw last year with Lando and Max 2024. Verstappen wasn't great with his curb riding issues, and Lando was on top of him. His race pace here is really, really solid and could easily give Oscar a run for his money. It could be within 5 seconds ultimately, who knows? But he might still get the jump on Max if he can certainly get a little bit more understanding of the MCL 39, which he admits he's not fully clicked onto. He has been able to get some more insight onto it. It might start to close in. We might actually see him only losing out a few points, damage limitation, what have you, with Piastri. Who knows what may happen in race 9 in Spain, which is going to be happening at the end of this triple header. And I can't believe this. We're going to have so many races coming up. It's going to be wild. But yes, I think it is safe to say that Lando will be finishing ahead of Max. He's managed to find some way to bamboozle the Dutchman, but now he's got another guy to topple. And speaking of the Dutchman, I do think he will be hanging in there for a 3rd place, which will certainly help him. The main thing that Red Bull need to do is to make sure they don't balls it up in the pits, because that has seriously been something that they've been dropping the ball on. And it's those kind of fundamental errors could easily see Verstappen looking around for different teams that have a better handle on their pit stops. Which is still weird to say with Red Bull. It's nuts. Quite honestly, it's just really impossible to discount Max Verstappen here because his performance here is absolutely electric. Even with an RB20 that really did not like riding the curbs, he still kept Lando behind him, even though it was by only 7/10 of the final lap. It's still something that he is worth commending. And we're just going to be seeing another situation where if he can boss it on these C6 tyres, give it everything he can, and get a really good solid second row tier, he'll be able to keep it easily. He'll probably keep Russell behind him unless there is some kind of undercut. Or if the Mercedes upgrades, which are being brought apparently, are better than Red Bulls, that take them past them. But I do think that Yuki Tsunoda will be with him in Q3 to be able to help him out with maybe a tow, maybe out to just see what he can do in terms of setups and insight. It's all a bit more helpful for the likes of Max, but it's still a little bit up in the air. I don't really think he's going to be going for a win, but quite frankly, I think this is all damage limitation until the technical directive comes in, which may bring Red Bull back into play and maybe give Max Verstappen more legs to stand on in terms of trying to get that 5th world title in a row. And he'll be praying. He'll be doing rain dance after rain dance after rain dance to have that 25% chance of rain on Sunday afternoon to actually produce a few spits and showers and stuff. Because if that happens and they have to go on intermediates, oh, he'll be right up there with the McLarens. He might go for the win, but this is a very, very low chance. He'll be expecting a minor miracle. And speaking of the Mercedes, George Russell is right here, because how could I not discount Russell either? Because he is right there. He is consistent. He's right behind Max Verstappen in the championship. And I know that some commentators have been saying that, well, yeah, if he beats Max, then he gives Max more reason to go over to Mercedes. But I really don't think that's going to be happening. I'm pretty sure that by the time in the next few weeks, we'll be getting the confirmation of George and Kimi in the car for next year and the year after that. But right now, he is sitting pretty, George, with nearly 100 points after just 7 Grand Prix, if he can get that P4, which I seriously think he can, because after Miami, despite the setback of being out-qualified by his teammate twice, he was feeling extremely satisfied, even though he wasn't really feeling it on Saturday for the sprint. And then, of course, he had a bit of a medical emergency after the race. I think it was stomach cramps or something like that. I may be wrong, but it was certainly something enough to get him out of doing all the media duties, which would be expected of podium sitters. And Mercedes, they'll be bolting on a fair few upgrades. I think they've got some floor updates, some beam wing updates, but I think a lot of teams do beam wing updates for track-specific events. But I do think that Mercedes are really confident with what they're bringing. This is their first major upgrade package that they've had all season. Things are looking up for Russell. He might be able to get a car which gives him something a bit more of an edge over Antonelli. A podium is likely, but right now, we can't always guarantee that Red Bull are going to have a bad day in the office when it comes to their pit stops, because these are rare anomalies, and I do think they can be fixed. But Mercedes, they'll be eyeing them up considerably. Now, okay, 5th place was pretty tight. It was either going to be Charles Leclerc or Kimi Antonelli. I do think the battle for 5th place, though, it's going to go the Ferrari's way, and they might give something for the Turbo Rossi to smile about, because it may be 5th and 6th with an Italian driver in 6th place, but I do think it's going to be within a couple of seconds or something like that. I don't think Ferrari's going to have an easy run for its money to try and figure in the top 5 or something like that. And Charles himself has said in Miami that was the best he can do with the machinery that he's got, that he's exceeded the maximum that the car has available to him. yet it still lags behind the leaders considerably. They're only bringing a modest tweak to Imola. It's not like last year where Imola was going to be a deciding factor in what 2024 would bring. They're bringing a bigger package for Spain. They are trying to make sure they get everything right, because remember what happened last year at the Spanish Grand Prix? They brought an update package, it set them back considerably. It took them several Grand Prix, I think Hungary, until they actually managed to get the porpoising under control again. And arguably, that mid-season slump most likely cost them the Constructors' title, because I do think they dropped so many points. That could have been theirs had they stayed on course and they not gone so off course. So this year, they want to make sure everything is down pat and the timing is correct, because if they can absolutely boss it, they could be competitive again, or at least a little bit closer, and maybe topple Red Bull from third place in the Constructors at bare minimum. But unfortunately, the SF25 still suffers from understeer, and with the C6 tyre, you have to boss it in qualifying. If they make one mistake or a lock-up, or if they just still can't turn it properly, then they are going to suffer. We may see a Ferrari out in Q2, who knows? But the fact of the matter is, though, is that it's going to be very important for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton to be able to do well in qualifying, or else they're not going to figure in it. And this upgrade they're bringing reportedly won't even matter, because qualifying is going to be very important, especially here. Because this in Monaco, and what I think will also help secure 5th place for Charles Leclerc is if there is a safety car, because that could easily happen. If they are able to nurse the tyres a little bit, that might be able to save them toward the end of the race if they do go for a soft tyre stint at the end. There are a lot of variables here, but let's just say that Charles Leclerc can't rely on P5 through raw pace alone. Or if there's a little bit of chaos at the front, that will help. And speaking of chaos, there is plenty of chaos to be had with some of these drivers who I quite frankly think did not belong in Formula 1. Not necessarily the worst, but they didn't give the best vibes. To find out the 10 worst drivers of the 21st century through not just stats but other factors, watch this video next, straight after this one.